Good afternoon, everyone. It's really lovely to be here with you this afternoon at the conference talking about carbon and potential funding opportunities we have in the future. My name's Becky Wilson and I work at the Farm Carbon Toolkit. And we're a farmer-led organisation, really aiming to try and provide support, tools and resources to farmers to help understand how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, how that links through into farm energy resilience in terms of building soil health, but very much with an emphasis on how doing these things improves your farm business for the future. And that improvement in farm business may be through various different ways. It may be through the fact that actually by driving some of these practices forward on your farm, you're actually starting to improve efficiency. It may be that by through implementing some of these different things, you might be able to optimize the use of your resources and actually make your systems more productive. But it might also be that as we transition into this new post-CAP world, that actually there are opportunities for financial rewards. And those are some of the insights that I'll share with you today. At Farm Carbon Toolkit, we're farmer-led. So we are farmers talking to farmers, and that's really where this conversation needs to start. What do we have as an organisation? Well, the two main pillars of our organisation are a carbon calculator, which allows you to be able to calculate your carbon balance. And put very simply, your carbon offsets or sequestration. We then have a toolkit which allows you to understand how you can change that carbon balance and some of those management practices and options that might be available to you to both reduce emissions and improve sequestration. And then we also run a range of special projects, including the Soil Carbon Project, which is the largest project in the UK currently working with farmers that's both measuring and understanding how. When we're talking about agriculture's greenhouse gas emissions, well, unlike other industries that are very much focusing on carbon dioxide and how they can sort of stop those burning of fossil fuels and the production of the emissions, for us within agriculture, our sort of picture is slightly more complicated in the fact that we're not just dealing with emissions from carbon dioxide, we're also dealing with emissions that are coming from two other gases, nitrous oxide and methane. And what's really important for us is we have to look at how we can deal with the complex interplay of those gases and actually look at those strategies that can help reduce emissions and start to build sequestration. Nitrous oxide emissions, which again aren't having much attention at the moment, but are incredibly important as a greenhouse gas, are very much coming from how we manage our soils, our fertilizers and our manures. Methane emissions from our much maligned ruminant animals, and then also from how we manage our slurries and manures. And then carbon dioxide, again, burning of fossil fuels. So that's for how we use our farm diesel, electricity, and then what happens in terms of how we cultivate and till our soil and release carbon back up. We have opportunities on farms in terms of the generation of renewable energy to provide carbon offsets. But we also have the unique ability as an industry to be able to suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and hold it in our soils through carbon sequestration. There's also ability to hold it in our woody biomass and in our environmental areas. And again, there are currently payment options available for planting trees through the Woodland Carbon Code. We need to start to generate this code and this way of measuring and reporting and verification so that we can also include soil within that. Why should we manage carbon on the farm? Well, there's lots of policy drivers and legislation. We've got the transition to net zero, the UK government saying we should be at net zero by 2050. The NFU saying that the aspiration for our industry is that we get there by 2040. But we've also got a lot of other players in this market now starting to look at how they can develop net zero targets. That includes retailers, it includes local authorities, it includes different producer organisations that are all starting to navigate how they can take their farmers along this journey with them, both in terms of reducing emissions and improving sequestration. So there's an increasing attention on agriculture from our policy. But actually, if we look back at a farm level as to why we should be managing carbon, well, it makes business sense. There's a really good relationship between efficient use of resources and reduction in our carbon emissions. It allows us to be more informed and make better decisions. So we can start to think, well, actually, what are the carbon impacts of me changing my practice? What are the carbon impacts of some of those things that I might be looking to implement within my business over the next 1, 2 or 5 years? It enables a positive narrative, and it's really important to have a positive narrative. It allows us to start to tell our stories and highlight the good things that we're all doing on farm that are building resilience, reducing emissions and improving sequestration. It creates more resilient businesses and it allows us to be more future-proof. So having an understanding of where carbon is being emitted on your farm and the potential options for sequestration allows you to understand how you might be able to navigate the future world of payments and policies. And that process all starts with measuring your carbon footprint, because identifying your carbon footprint is that first step in being able to quantify the contribution that that farm is making to climate change. And put very simply, a carbon footprint identifies the amount and the sources of carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide that are emitted from the farm, and then highlights areas where you might make improvements or changes to reduce emissions. Highlights current sequestration projects and offsetting, and looks at what you might be able to do in the future. Allows you to be more aware and make better decisions, but also those metrics that you use need to be relevant, so they need to make sense to your business, they need to be practical, they need to be consistent, and they need to be that first step in terms of informing behavioural change. And we're seeing an increasing desire for carbon footprinting, and it's coming from varying different areas. It's coming from farmers wanting to understand their impact. As we start to talk more about net zero and what that might mean on the farm, we're having a lot of more farmers who are saying, well, where am I? How close am I to net zero? And what might those opportunities be for me to start to change things? We've got farmers that are direct selling to consumers. So we're starting to do that adding value. And their consumers are starting to ask questions about the carbon credentials of their products. By being able to do a carbon footprint and be able to understand your current proximity to net zero or beyond, you can suddenly have a new marketing angle and allow to have a different conversation with your consumers. Producer organisations are looking to try and differentiate their production system. We're working with a lot of supply chains who, again, are starting to want to craft a narrative around the carbon credentials of their supply chains. Processors, again, which traditionally have stopped their carbon footprinting at the farm gate, are now starting to want to include that as well. As I said earlier, local communities and local authorities who have declared their climate emergencies, that are now wanting to understand the contribution that their landscapes and their agricultural sectors can play in terms of helping them achieve those ambitions. But where does voluntary offsetting and some of the payments that might be available fit into this? We have to have a robust way of measuring it so that we can be really clear and conscious and confident that the results are right. And how might we start to recraft the financial system to help reward those farmers who are doing those things which make a difference? There's this idea of offsetting and the ability to use farms and farmland as an offsetting opportunity is getting increasing traction. There's an increasing number of organisations which are committing to those net zero targets. As I've already said, we've got the UK commitment to it. There's a growing public awareness on climate change through looking at Extinction Rebellion and the Schools for Climate strikes, which is leading to that expectation that we do something. We've also got the rise of natural capital accounting, which recognises the importance of some of those ecosystem services and public goods that our lands and how we manage those landscapes are capable of providing. And natural climate solutions and the opportunities of regenerative agriculture are very much at the forefront of those discussions. So despite the fact that there is, quite a lot of interest at the moment in soil carbon and how we pay farmers for soil carbon, currently there are very few people who are paying farmers for carbon credits. It's about 645 projects that are registered under the sort of Woodland Carbon Code, and also some smaller number under the Peatland Restoration Fund. But there are several schemes that are due to be piloted this year that are very much looking at how to engage farmers and how to allow farmers to be paid for soil carbon sequestration. And a range of them are mentioned there. And that includes some that are currently active in Europe, some that are currently active in the States, and others. There are a range of codes which support that offsetting market, which allow us to have confidence and provide that consistent approach, but they don't currently include soil. Soil carbon code does not currently exist, but there is a group that is working together to try and bring together that monitoring and reporting and verification so that we can be very confident in the fact of what we're doing. So just to sort of bring it all together, really, even if you are to engage in some of those new and exciting payments as they start to develop and are more honed for farmers to use, the first step for you at an individual farm level is to use a carbon calculator and to understand and to baseline where you are now. And a carbon calculator gives you a tool to do that. None of them are perfect. We're still learning more about as we get better at understanding the research And as we start to ask the right questions, those carbon calculators are evolving. But it's really important to start somewhere. And understanding what's currently going on in your soils through taking some tests and analysis will allow you to start to understand what the potential might be for the future. But just because everything isn't set yet, we're in such an exciting time, but we have to start with that first step. So understanding and measuring what you're currently doing on farm allows you to do that. So hopefully that's been a good insight into some of the things that we're doing. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if you'd like to put any in the Q&A function. And thank you very much for listening.